Number 1.
Mary Boyle disappeared while visiting her grandparents in Ballycotton, Company Donegal on 18 March 1977. She is presumed dead. Mary's twin sister Anne Doherty and Margot O'Donnell, a sister of Daniel and neighbour and distant cousin of the Boyles, were interviewed at Pearse Street Garda Station in Dublin. Journalist Gemma O'Doherty is working with the women to highlight the case. Doherty has claimed her sister was killed by somebody known to her. She also believes she was sexually abused before her death. Speaking to thejournal.ie, O'Doherty said Doherty has known for many years who her sister's killer is after a person told her of their identity. O'Doherty said Doherty recently went to Gardaí in Dublin to put the investigation back in the spotlight. O'Doherty was present at Pearse St. Garda Station yesterday and said Doherty was interviewed by Gardaí for 6 hours and submitted a 16-page statement. She said O'Donnell was interviewed for about 5 hours and submitted a 10-page statement. O'Doherty added the women were exhausted but elated after the interviews and are hoping the case will finally move forward. She said Gardaí assured the women that this would be dealt with and no stone would be left unturned. They have to act, she stated. The Garda press office would not comment on specific elements of the case, but released the following statement to thejournal.ie. The disappearance of Mary Boyle, who went missing from near her grandparents' home in Cashellard, Ballycotton, Company Donegal on 18 March 1977, is the subject of an ongoing Garda investigation, and Garda Síochána continue to appeal to anyone with information to contact the incident room at Ballycotton Garda Station on 0719858530. The Garda Confidential line 1800 666 111, or any Garda station. A spokesperson for Justice Minister Francis Fitzgerald told us, the minister understands that the disappearance of Mary Boyle is an open and ongoing investigation, and any persons with information should bring it to the attention of Garda Síochána. Allegations in relation to inappropriate Garda actions are a matter for GSOC. A spokesperson for the Garda Síochána Ombudsman Commission, GSOC, said they would not be commenting on the investigation. Timeline of recent events in the Mary Boyle case. January 2011. A second review of the case began by Garda Síochána's northern region. Members of Mary's family and Gardaí searched an area of bog close to where she was last seen. The dig was instigated by Margot O'Donnell, who hired Danish psychic Jan Stearns to aid in the search. Gardaí released images of what an adult Mary might look like. October 2014. A man was arrested in connection to the case before being released without charge. At the time, Mary's mother Anne Boyle told Pat Kenny on Newstalk that she didn't know the man arrested, but he was from the general area. She said of the disappearance, "My heart was absolutely broken. People went back to their own lives, but I couldn't. I had to believe she was alive."
Number 2.
Driving along the isolated road that runs down the scenic Hook Peninsula in Ireland's ancient east, it is easy to spot the mansion that has earned itself the reputation as the most haunted house in Ireland. If ever a building fit the stereotype of a home haunted by its bloody and tragic past, this was it. Set against the backdrop of a rugged and windswept coastal setting, Loftus Hull looms over the surrounding landscape. Its historic walls have seen invasion, capture, plague, famine, and numerous personal tragedies, many of which live on as ghostly legends. Now, the famous house is up for sale to the right buyer. Irish Examiner reports that the asking price for Loftus Hull is €2.5 million, $2,878,837. This is 4 times the price the current owners paid for it 9 years ago. However, Aidan and Shane Quigley have put a new roof on the building and made several significant structural repairs to the hall since then. Even if someone matches the current price tag, Aidan Quigley says he is not just going to sell it house to anyone. "I'll be interviewing potential buyers. If a state body comes in, that's an option. If an American owner wants to live here, I'd be keen to work with them to restore it." The Quigleys may be the current owners, but the recorded history of Loftus Hull, and the land upon which it sits, stretches back some 800 years. Locals say the significance of the site goes back even more thousands of years, and was once sacred to the Druids, the high-ranking professional and religious class in ancient Celtic cultures. The story of Loftus Hull begins around 1170 AD, When Raymond Redmond Fitzgerald, nicknamed Legros, the Fat, landed at Bajinban Head in the Hook Peninsula, in what is now County Wexford in Ireland. It is a famous site in Irish history, known as the place where Ireland was lost and won. Raymond was among the first of a small band of Norman knights who played an active role in helping enforce Norman rule over Ireland. He acquired land in the area, upon which he built a castle known as Houseland Castle. Over the years, it fell into disrepair, and in 1350, descendants of Raymond le Gros built a new castle called the Hall or Redmond Hall. The hall remained with the Redmond family until the mid-1600s, when the Irish-Confederate Wars saw the castle repeatedly attacked and eventually seized as part of the Cromwellian confiscations. In one remarkable display of defense on July 20, 1642, Alexander Redmond, who was 68 at the time, managed to protect the hall from around 90 English invaders, with just the help of his 2 sons, some tenants, 2 soldiers, and a tailor. They staved off several more attacks, after which Alexander Redmond received favorable terms from Cromwell. Upon his death around 1651, Redmond's family were evicted from the hall, and their home put up for auction. In 1666, Henry Loftus, originally from Yorkshire, England, acquired the confiscated lands, and the mansion was renamed Loftus Hall. Over the decades and centuries that followed, the Loftus family rose in the peerage, producing barons, viscounts, earls, and marquesses, and as they climbed the ladder of aristocracy, the illustrious family hoped they could entice Queen Victoria to visit. With that goal in mind, John Henry Loftus, the 4th Marquess of Ely, embarked on an enormous renovation of the hall between 1870 and 1879, to make it grander than ever before. Although it is widely reported that Loftus Hall was completely demolished and rebuilt, there is evidence that much of the former hall was utilized and worked into the mansion that can be seen today. No expense was spared in the renovation of Loftus Hall. Erected as a 3-story mansion with a balustraded parapet, the hall boasts an ornate mosaic floor and a spectacular grand staircase, hand-carved by Italian craftsmen. The house certainly was fit for a queen, but Queen Victoria never arrived, causing deep disappointment to the Loftus family. While its rich and colorful past is enough to bring history buffs flocking, it is the legends, the unexplained mysteries, and the tales of ghostly apparitions that have made Loftus Hall one of the most visited mansions in the whole of Ireland. The legends stem from the real life and death of Anne Tottenham. In the mid-1600s, Charles Tottenham married the Honourable Anne Loftus, daughter of the 1st Viscount Loftus, and they had 6 children, 4 boys and 2 girls, Elizabeth and Anne. But his wife became ill and died while the girls were still young. 2 years later, Tottenham married his cousin Jane Cliff, and they lived together, along with Anne, in Loftus Hall. One night, amid a powerful storm, a ship arrived at the Hook Peninsula, and a young man made his way to Loftus Hall, asking if he could take shelter there. It was not uncommon for strangers to come knocking, as the rough waters around the South Wexford coast often resulted in ships being grounded on the shore or shattered by rocks. The man was invited in and ended up residing at the house for several weeks. During this time, Anne, now a young woman, fell in love with the stranger, and spent countless hours socializing with him in the tapestry room. According to local legends, one evening, Anne was playing cards with the stranger, as well as other guests, when she leaned down under the table to collect a card she had dropped, and noticed that the stranger had cloven hoofs. She screamed loudly, causing the stranger to expose himself as the devil. He transformed into a ball of fire and shot up through the roof, leaving Anne in a state of trauma from which she never recovered. Anne's mental state deteriorated rapidly, and her family, embarrassed by her behavior, confined her to a room in the house, where she remained until her death in around 1775. It is said that from this time onwards, Loftus Hall became plagued by severe poltergeist activity, the troubled Anne never able to rest in peace. Several Protestant clergymen were summoned by the family to put a stop to it, but none could rid the house of its evil forces. In their desperation, the family, themselves Protestant, called upon a Catholic priest who was a tenant on their estate, Father Thomas Broaders, who was successful in cleansing the house of negative forces. It is popularly reported that his gravestone contains the inscription, "Here lies the body of Thomas Broaders, who did good and prayed for all, and who banished the devil from Loftus Hall." Though there is no evidence that this inscription ever existed, it is fair to say that many of the details of this account are likely to be little more than fictional folk tales. Nevertheless, reports going back over a century say that Anne was indeed confined to a room in Loftus Hall until her death. So what really happened to her? It is most likely that the account of the cloven hoof and the devil shooting through the roof was made up by the Loftus family to deter beggars and other strangers from paying a visit to the hall. After all, they were desperately hoping to entice Queen Victoria for a visit, so the last thing they needed was undesirables getting in the way. This then raises the question as to whether Anne really was confined due to mental illness, or whether there was another reason for this tragic ending to her life. According to one alternative account, the stranger had fallen in love with Anne and had asked Charles Tottenham for her hand in marriage, but was refused permission. He was turned away from the house, leaving Anne heartbroken. But there is another twist in this story. During the restoration of Loftus Hall, the skeletal remains of a tiny infant were found between the walls, in what is believed to have been the room Anne had been locked in. Did Anne fall pregnant with the stranger, casting shame upon her family? This could have provided a motive for her father to lock her away, never to be seen again. One local account suggests that Anne died during childbirth, after her father refused to let anyone know of her pregnancy, including the local doctor, and she suffered complications leading to her death. Today, Anne Tottenham's grave is located in a local graveyard in Wexford, but something is very peculiar about it. Unlike the surrounding graves, it is completely cemented over. The people that buried her clearly wanted to ensure no one could ever access her body. What dark secrets did Anne take with her to the grave? Every so often we come across stories that leave us with an eerie feeling of incompleteness. It seems as if our brains put us on notice, forcing us to fill in the missing gaps until we get satisfaction. And the Peter Bergman case is one of those mysteries that has kept the police, journalists, and internet sleuths on tenterhooks for the past 11 years. The story unfolds on a quiet beach in Ireland, where a local man, Arthur Kinsella, discovers a human body on the beach. On first glance, it appeared as if the man had gone for a swim, drowned, and subsequently washed ashore during low tide. Bergman was found naked, his clothes scattered along the shore. But here was when things got strange. There was no documentation of any kind found inside his clothes confirming his identity. Stranger still, all the tags from his clothes, including his undergarments, had been carefully cut away with scissors. The police also could not find Peter Bergman in the lists of people who arrived in the UK legally, and the address that Bergman had left while checking in a local hotel turned out to be a fake. Then things got even more bizarre. The last days of Bergman were known to some extent, thanks to an extensive network of CCTV cameras in Sligo, the town in Ireland where he stayed for 3 days. And video surveillance showed that Bergman left his hotel at least 13 times with a filled purple bag. And every time, he came back with an empty bag. Here again, another strange fact was discovered about Bergman. The man was a professional in evading cameras. It seemed that somehow Bergman knew about the locations of the cameras and used their blind spots cunningly to get rid of the contents of the bag without being noticed. The police checked all over the city, but found nothing. What was inside that purple bag? What was he doing in Sligo, a sleepy little Irish town in the first place? And why didn't anybody ask for him in the last 11 years? In 2013, the documentary The Last Days of Peter Bergman attempted to answer these questions and shed more light on the case. But so far nobody has been able to crack the jigsaw puzzle of Peter Bergman. Metaphorically, Loftus Hall is indeed haunted by its dark and troubled history. One can almost feel the sadness and traumas that have taken place within its walls. But does the ghost of Anne still roam the cold and empty rooms of the mansion as it stands today? Many are convinced the answer is yes. Indeed, American ghost hunters carried out detailed investigations of the house and claimed to have detected numerous anomalies. But it was in 2014 that Loftus Hall cemented its reputation as the most haunted house in Ireland, when a visitor taking a tour believed that he captured a haunting image on his camera. It subsequently went viral, attracting the attention of people all around the world. 21-year-old Thomas Beavis said he was browsing through the photos on his camera when he noticed the ghostly figures of a young woman and an older woman in a window. In the early 20th century, the Loftus family went bankrupt and, following the death of the last member of the Loftus family, it was taken over by the Benedictines, who occupied it until 1935. In 1937, the Sisters of Providence converted it into a convent and school for young girls wanting to join the order. Locals say that people were terrified to attend Mass in its chapel, given the well-circulated legends of the devil himself visiting the hall. In 1983, Loftus Hall was purchased by Michael Devereux, who opened it as Loftus Hall Hotel. Michael died in the hall, and his wife struggled for several years trying to run the hotel on her own, until one night she took off without any explanation, leaving everything behind. Queen of Sweden says her old palatial home is haunted by friendly ghosts. Dark history hangs over royal residence. The haunted halls of Holyrood Palace Loftus Hall then entered another dark period. The property was left vacant, but was occupied illicitly for nearly a decade by people conducting satanic rituals and meetings. In 2011, it was purchased by its current owners, the Quigley family, who have embarked on an ambitious project of restoration. Today, Loftus Hall is open to the public, who can join a 45-minute guided tour that showcases the history of the hall and its many legends. Leaving the hall after one of these tours, one is left with more questions than answers. Fact and fiction have become so closely entwined in the history of Loftus Hall that it is impossible to determine where history ends and the legend begins. Perhaps the future owner of Loftus Hall will gain special insight into the true story.
Number 3.
In February 1983, at the height of the Troubles, Ireland faced a truly mysterious crime that remains virtually unsolved. Shergar, a beloved thoroughbred racehorse worth over $15 million, was kidnapped from his stable in County Kildare by a gang of machine gun-wielding men in balaclavas. After failed attempts to demand money for the stallion, gentle Shergar was brutally killed, and his body was never found. The most famous and valuable racehorse in the world, Shergar had won the 1981 Epsom Derby by 10 lengths, which is the longest winning margin in the race's 202-year history. Following this triumph, he had 4 more major Derby wins and was named European Horse of the Year. When he retired after that first season, racehorse owners paid up to $120,000 for shares in his services, impregnating mares eager to have young horses from his bloodline to train for races. The stallion had a white blaze mark on his face, 4 white socks, and a distinctive racing style of running with his tongue hanging out. He was gentle, calm and kind. On the cold, muggy evening of February 8, 1983, Shergar was kidnapped by a gang of men in balaclavas, thought to be part of the IRA. The bay colt was owned by the Aga Khan, the billionaire spiritual leader to 15 million Ismaili Muslims. When he was returned to Ireland after her first winning season, he was syndicated for $15 million between 34 people. Each share was worth around $382,000. 6 of which were kept by the Aga Khan. Shergar was just 5 years old when he was snatched in the middle of the night from the Ballycotton stud in Company Kildare. He had been preparing for his second season as a breeding stallion, the BBC said. It was shortly after 8 p.m. when the son of Jim Fitzgerald, Shergar's head groom that lived at the stud, heard a knock at the door. He opened it to find 2 men wearing balaclavas wielding guns. One of them said, "We have come for Shergar. We want $3 million for him." Jim Fitzgerald, a father of 6, was forced at gunpoint to Shergar's stable, where they were joined by 6 more masked gunmen. He loaded Shergar into the horsebox the men had brought with them. Fitzgerald was then forced into their car at gunpoint. Among others, one reason the investigation was so difficult for authorities was because the kidnappers had chosen the day before Ireland's Big Goss racehorse sailed to abduct Shergar, when many horseboxes were being driven across all of Ireland's roads, thereby making it hard to differentiate him. "I can still remember that night in that car with them lads. All sorts of thoughts were racing through my head about what they might do to me. One of them, with the revolver, was very aggressive," Mr. Fitzgerald told the Telegraph about his ride in the kidnapper's car. After driving him around for 3 hours, the kidnappers dumped Fitzgerald out of the car. He found his way to a telephone and rang his brother. This phone call led to a series of phone calls between Shergar's shareholders, his vet, racing associates and several Irish ministers. This process is referred to as a caricature of police bungling, as the actual police weren't notified until 8 hours after Shergar was taken, and the men were long gone from the area. Using coded phrases, the kidnappers soon began negotiations with a representative of the Aga Khan over the telephone, but made sure to hang up before 90 seconds passed, so that authorities couldn't track their location. Collectively, it had been decided not to pay the ransom, because they figured if they had, every racehorse in the world would be in danger, as many of them were worth over £1 million, $1.5 million, and Ireland had lacked adequate security. The hunt for Shergar created a huge media storm. Everyone in the UK and Ireland were hell-bent on getting him back, and the Dublin police had offered an over $150,000 reward for his return. The kidnappers had agreed to negotiate with a man named Derek Thompson, who had worked for ITV's racing team. He flew to Belfast to negotiate at the Europa Hotel. He said the scene that greeted him at Belfast Airport was unreal. It was like being a film star. There were cameras all around. About 100 cameramen and journalists were in or outside the Europa Hotel as Thompson and his co-negotiators arrived. The men never reached an agreement. Thompson received a phone call the next day from the kidnappers. They said, "The horse has had an accident. He's dead." He then hung up. There are several ideas pertaining to what happened to Shergar. One idea is that the horse did have some sort of accident while in a frenzy, and the men killed him because they couldn't handle his crazed manner. Senior IRA leader Kevin Mallon is thought to be the man who devised the plot. A convicted killer from Company Tyrone, he eventually became part of IRA folklore after shooting his way out of one prison and being lifted by helicopter from another. What has been discovered almost definitively, according to a close course, was that two handlers, one clutching a machine gun, went into the remote stable where the horse was being held and opened fire. A former IRA member told the Sunday Telegraph, "Shergar was machine-gunned to death. There was blood everywhere, and the horse even slipped on his own blood. There was lots of cussing and swearing because the horse wouldn't die. It was a very bloody death. It was several minutes before Shergar bled to death." It is also widely believed his kidnappers buried him in a bog in Company Leitrim, though some think they dumped him into the Sea of Ireland's south coast. Shergar's former jockey Walter Swinburne, who rode Shergar at his famous race, was distressed by the findings. "No horse deserves an ending like that, let alone one as special as Shergar." Shergar's body was never found, and the case remains a mystery. The IRA has never officially claimed responsibility for stealing the beloved horse. The incident has inspired several books, documentaries, and a film starring Mickey Rourke.
Number 4.
Did water monsters large enough to threaten life exist at one time in Glenade Lake Company Leitrim? Do they still reside in its depths? The story of a horrific encounter that happened along its shores many years ago still puzzles and fascinates, inspiring discussion and speculation. The question as to what really happened then, or what secrets may still lie hidden under the placid waters of this Leitrim lake, have never been fully answered. The story tells of a fierce struggle to the death between the MC Laughlin brothers of Glenade and that fierce brute, the whistling Deparchew. The legend of the Deparchew, waterhound, stems from the bestial murder of Grain Nye Connolly at Glenade Lake on September 24, 1722. The details were well known one time, and the ballad sung at fairs on the streets of Kinlow. Some say she went to the lake to wash clothes. The ballad tells she went to bathe. It is no matter. When she failed to return, her husband Trowlich Mac Laughlin went to look for her. He was aghast when he found her body lying by the lake with the beast lying asleep on her mangled breast. This and the chase that ensued would have little credibility today if it were not for the tombstone marking the grave of Grain Nye Connolly. Although worn smooth and unclear now, it can still be seen at the old cemetery of Conwell near Kinlow, Company Leitrim. A carving on the moss-encrusted stone shows a strange beast being stabbed by a dagger. Local people claim a similar monument existed at one time, not so far away in Kilrusk Cemetery. Broken and lost around 1922, it may have been the inspiration for the Conwell Memorial, or indeed evidence of yet another monster. According to Patrick Doherty of Glenade, local lore records that the chase, which started at Frank M.C. Sherry's, faltered at Casiel Ban, Cashilgarin, Stonefort, when Mac Laughlin was forced to stop with the blacksmith there to replace a lost horseshoe. When the enraged monster caught up with them, the horses were hurriedly drawn across the entrance to form a barrier. Giving the terrified man a sword, the blacksmith advised him, when the creature charges the horse, he'll put his head right out through him. As soon as he does this, you be quick and cut his head off. Patrick insists the story's credibility is proven by the carved image engraved on Glenade Connolly's tombstone in Conwell Cemetery, Cashel Stone Fort, near where the chase ended and the departure met its gory end, still stands today nestled on a height under the sheltering prow of Bearban Bulban's head. Both monster and horse are said to lie buried nearby. The words of the following poem reinforce Patrick's assertions. They form part of the legend surrounding an event which excites discussion and controversy to the present day. The words of the ballad, skillfully put together by a hedge schoolmaster of the time, bring the story vividly to life. The scribe's name is lost to us and the circumstances of his existence, but his voice speaks eloquently across the centuries today, as clearly as if the words were penned yesterday. They are an articulate and enduring tribute to the event and to the poet's genius. By Glenade Lake tradition tells 200 years ago, a thrilling scene enacted was to which, as years unflow, old men and women still relate, and while relating dread, some demon of its kind may yet be found within its bed. It happened one McLolan lived close by the neighboring shore, a lovely spot, where fairies often rivalry wandered o'er, a bodeous dell, where prince and chief oft met in revelry with Frenchmen bold and warriors old to hunt the wild boar free. He and his wife, Grace Connolly, lived there unknown to fame, their years in peace, until one day from out the lakes there came what brought a change in all their home and prospects too. The water fiend, the enchanted being, the dreaded departure. It was on a bright September morn, the sun scarce mountain high, no chill or damp was in the air. All nature seemed to be as if to render homage proud the cloudless sky above, a day for mortals to discourse in luxury and love. And whilst this gorgeous way of life and beauty did abound, from out the vastness of the lake stole forth the waterhound, and seized for victim her who shared McLolan's bed and board, his loving wife, his more than life, whom almost he adored. She, having gone to bathe, it seems, within the water clear, and not having returned when she might, her husband, fraught with fear, hasting to where he her might find, when oh, to his surprise, her mangled form, still bleeding warm, lay stretched before his eyes, upon her bosom, snow white once, but now besmeared with gore. The departure reposing was, his surfeiting being o'er, her bowels and entrails all around tinged with a reddish hue. Oh God, he cried, 'tis hard to bear, but what am I to do? He prayed for strength, the fiend lay still, he tottered like a child. The blood of life within his veins surged rapidly and wild. One long-lost glance at her he loved, then fast his footsteps turned to home, while all his pent-up rage and passion fiercely burned. He reached his house, he grasped his gun, which clenched with nerves of steel. He backward sped, upraising his arm, and then one piercing, dying, squeal was heard upon the balmy air. But hark! What's that came one moment next from out of its depth as if revenge to claim? The comrade of the dying fiend with whistles long and loud came nigh and nigher to the spot. McLolan, growing cowed, rushed to his home. His neighbors called, their counsel asked, and flight was what they bade him do at once, and not to wait till night. He and his brother, a sturdy pair, as brothers true when tried, their horses took, their homes forsook, and westward fast they did ride. One dagger sharp and long each man had for protection, too fast pursued by that fierce brute, the whistling departure. The rocks and dells rang with its yells, the eagles screamed in dread. The ploughman left his horses alone, the fishes too, 'tis said, away from the mountain streams though far, went rushing to the sea, and nature's laws did almost pause for death or victory. For 20 miles the gallant steeds the riders proudly bore with mighty strain o'er hill and dale, that ne'er was seen before. The fiend fast closing on their tracks, his dreaded cry more shrill, 'twas brothers try, we'll do or die on Cashel Hill. Dismounting from their panting steeds, they placed them one by one across the path and lengthways formed within the ancient dun, and standing by the outermost horse awaiting for their foe, their daggers raised, their nerves they braced to strike that fatal blow. Not long to wait, for nose on trail the scenting hound arrived, and through the horses with a plunge to force himself he tried, and just as through the outermost horse he plunged his head and foremost part, M.C. Glolan's dagger to the hilt, lay buried in his heart. Thank God! Thank God! The brothers cried in wildness and delight. Our humble home by Glenade Lake shall shelter us tonight. Be any doubt to what I write, go visit old Conwell. There see the grave where sleeps the brave whose epitaph can tell.
Number 5.
Ballycotton is a fishing village in Company, Cork. This coastal village overlooks Ballycotton Bay and has a sandy beach, which stretches out for about 25 kilometers. 16 miles for those not on the metric system. Interestingly, due to severe coastal erosion, meters of land crumble away into the sea every few years, and due to this, Ballycotton is actually a resettlement of an older village, which is now long underwater. On the 07th of July 1878, residents witnessed an unbelievable sight. A new island suddenly appeared just off the coast and could been seen by people who were now starting to gather along the shore. It was said that it could not have been a sea monster or whale, as the view was so clear that witness claimed to be able to see a coastline, woodlands, mountains and valleys on this mysterious new island. Fishermen ventured out on their boats with aims to explore the island, but it faded into thin air upon their approach. The island has not been seen since. Other coastal areas such as Ballyheig Strand, Corrigaholt and Ballynaleirin Bay have also reportedly witnessed similar anomalies, alongside areas of Scotland also. The theory that the scientist in me can agree with is, could this island have been a Fata Morgana? A Fata Morgana is a mirage named after sorceress Morgan Le Fay that can be seen as a narrow band situated above the horizon. In short, this phenomenon occurs because of the bending of light rays as they pass through air layers of different temperatures, resulting in distorted or inverted images. These mirages have been known to change rapidly, which could explain why island disappeared for the fishermen. This could also have been due to the fishermen leaving the area of the different air temperatures for the mirage to be visible, but I'm not going to delve into the physics of it too much. I left those days behind me in college. Another theory bouncing around is the legendary island of High Brassel, named after the Celtic High King of the world, Bresel. Many medieval maps even had it noted off the west or south coast, sought by Brendan the Navigator. This promised land is said to be hidden from the human eye and only becomes visible for one day every 7 years. In Ireland, this island is also speculated to possibly be the famous Turnanog. In 1674, Captain John Nisbet supposedly came across a deep fog, and as they passed through it came across a shoreline shrouded in mist. They decided to explore the island and saw large black magical rabbits. I suppose the cats needed a break, and a wise, grizzled magician. The wise man gave them gold and silver, and they went on their merry way. In 1872, T.J. Westrup and the O'Flaherty family claimed to have witnessed the island appear and disappear, and claimed to have visited the island many times before. This was 6 years before the Ballycotton appearance though. Either someone got their dates wrong, or these islands were not High Brassel if you believe the mythology of course. Seals, dolphins and whales can be seen in the area of Ballycotton. Seals and dolphins would be too small to appear as a large island, but could a whale? Reports state that the witnesses could see landscape features of the island, such as a coastline and forests. So it could not have been a whale. Could this be down to pareidolia? Pareidolia is a phenomenon where the mind perceives a familiar pattern where none exists, such as the infamous Jesus on a slice of toast or a piece of fruit that seems to be smiling back at you. If this was a whale, or as previously explained a mirage, then possibly in the residents' minds it looked like an island. Just to note, whales are only seen in this area around December and January, whereas this event happened in July. Could this island be a ghostly apparition of Ballycotton's underwater predecessors? The coastal erosion could have forced many other settlements back inland long before the 1800s. No story is complete without some mention of ghosts. No mystery is complete without our good old friends, the aliens. Yes, as always, there is a theory that High Brassel has an alien link. In 1980 in Rendlesham Forest, there were reported sightings of unexplained lights, and is linked with UFO landings. This happened near RAF Woodbridge, which was in use by the United States Air Force at the time. Sergeant Jim Peniston reportedly encountered a strange craft which communicated a binary code to him through telepathy. Decoding the binary, It reads origin 52.09425532 and 13.131269W, which is just of the south-west coast of Ireland, and correlates with some of the maps, which depict the location of High Brassel. The theory suggests that High Brassel might be a sort of station for extraterrestrial or time travelers. Ancient Aliens did an episode on this, S06E09, suggesting that High Brassel may be an extraterrestrial base which is using a cloaking device. This is one rabbit hole I know I will go down when I have some free time to read some more. There are so many theories that can be passed around about this story, and we could be researching them all day. But then no work would be done, would there? So, what are your theories? Was this island just an explainable occurrence of a mirage? Did our otherworldly friend's cloaking device glitch? Or was it the fabled land of the young?